Okay, guys, I'm getting ready for this MythLab. Okay, guys, I'm getting ready for this MythLab. Okay, so I'm locked in now. Let me turn down the volume of my music here just so you guys can hear me. And I'm telling you guys, man, this has been like a trying morning, man. This has been a very trying morning. Like, even my equipment's going crazy. Like, it's been tough, man. But I'm going to get through it. I'm going to persevere. And, So this one I want to get into like right after the bat, right? I just wanted to tell you guys right now, this is actually a very personal myth lab for me, man. One of the first like ones that I've done where it's not just I like the characters, and I'll explain to you why. So I'm doing this Outsider Archetype, and I'm going to explain to you what I mean by the outsider, right? Because this is a big thing, and each one of them that we're going to represent is these guys are outsiders by choice, like overall, right? The simplest way that I can understand it, right? Like, let's talk about the archetype. When we talk about the archetype, what makes all these guys definitively outsiders in their cultures, right? What makes each one of the definitively an outsider? Now, Odin, we know about. So we're going to talk about three beings here and how their outsiderness forced the change in boundaries. Now, one, whether they originate inside of a system or outside of a system is a big part of it, and how they do. Now, Odin himself walks beyond the boundaries and he stays on the outside. Enkidu was one who made men, who was civilized. He was an outsider, clearly, to deal with Gilgamesh. And then Amurru, he was a force that's even deeper than all this. He's called the Lord of the West. So let's talk about it. And I had a request to do Amurru, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, I will do requests a lot of times, especially if it's a deity that I'm like kind of interested in. And you know what, man, this is really bothering me because like I don't understand what's going on here. Even now, I just noticed that for some reason you want to use my wrong camera, and I don't understand that, right? You know, when you're looking at your image, I'm like, why am I blurry here? And it's because you've got me on the wrong camera, right? My own systems were banging against me. So now that I'm set up, so I got on Nine World Chronicles. You know, I was just checking my comments and all that, and I got this comment, and clearly the comment asked me if I could do the Sumerian deity Amurru, and this is to I can't remember what the guy's name. Let me see if I can find your name here. Right, this is to Yakmil 9. So you got 9 in there. Like my other video on Shiva, asked if I could do this deity on the Mesopotamia. Now, ordinarily, I do request. That's kind of not an unusual thing, especially if I find the deity to be interesting. But Amurru resonated with me, and this is because I just lost one of my really good friends, and that was his first name. We didn't call him that. His first name was Amurru. I think he spelled it with a singular R, and I'm not even saying that linguistically there. I don't know where his mother would have gotten the name Amurru, right? And we never called him that, but I always knew I knew what his full name was. I knew his government name, right? Because that's how deep we are together. And I just lost my boy like a couple of weeks ago. So when you said the name, it resonated with me. It made me say, "Oh man, I really should do this, guys." Amurru is like this external force, and the name just coincided. So I felt like, man, maybe this is my boy speaking to me through you to get me to talk about him, to give him some shine in the show. And if that's the case, if you're working with my boy so he gets some shine in the show, all right, I'm with it. So I want to talk about him and why he's important, because he represents the Amorites, if I'm getting this correctly. So let's talk about him. Now, he, of course, comes from Akkadian culture and Martua culture, or Sumerian, at the earliest parts of their foundation. His name means the Westerner. So they were defining him as an outsider, which the Amorites were at the time that they came into this area. He is called the Lord of the West, right? Which clearly the direction from which they came, and he is associated with the nomadic lifestyle, the steep, the mountains, the pastoral existence. This was different because the nomadic people did move around the culture, so they were always coming outside. They were literally the outsiders, but they become very important. The Amorites over years, so Amurru, the Amorites become very important. And he's known for his symbolic staff, which we'll see. You see Odin with that staff again playing that wanderer. He is known for the horned animal, the gazelles. Again, they moved, again, these were nomads, so they moved as the herds moved. So he's typically seen in this format. Let me see if I can get an image of him that's actually better for you guys here. I do have that locked in. So this is him. So he's always seen in this bearded form. He's often shown with the horned crown, carrying a staff, and associated with the rugged terrain. And you can see this guy absolutely fits. This is the rugged frontierman, the earliest version of it, right? This is way before they started getting all kind of like modern tech, but this is what they really look like. So he represents the Amorites, a semi-nomadic people from the western regions who entered Mesopotamia and later became politically dominant. This was what important because they became the outsiders who became part of the system. And that's one of the way that we do look at outsiders. So he functioned as this divine embodiment of the nomadic identity. He represents non-urban lifestyle. I'm strictly urban. I have a very urban lifestyle, right? He is the opposite of that. His personification is external cult pressure on the civilization itself. So unlike structured deities, he is not tied to city governments. He's not tied to their temple systems. He's not tied to bureaucracy. He's not tied to any of the stuff that makes a civilization hold together. And that's always kind of the battle, right? Civilization is always fighting to defend itself from everybody who's not within the civilization. So he embodies through this nomadic lifestyle mobility over permanence. That was cultural thing. This was survival over structure. They went where they had to go. They made it very easy for themselves. This was about adaptation to the land, to the circumstance, to the animals versus control. So he reflects the integration of the outsider into the system. This is what they become. Now, this time period that we're talking about here, we're going to go way back. This is second millennium BCE. They migrated into Mesopotamia. Then there's the rise of the Amorite dynasties, including in Babylon. Now, in older Babylonian period, he becomes formally introduced into the Mesopotamian religion at the highest level. By later periods, he is absorbed into the broader pantheon structure with reduced distinct identity. So he becomes a bigger part. So he parallels his rise through the religious system and ultimately the pantheon system is a reflection of the way the Amorites settled into the area and became political. They got all political like, right? And that's really how they were seen. And not in an adversarial way. They were outsiders, but they were still taken in as a part of Mesopotamia. So there wasn't a lot, I'm sure some level of pushback, but there was not overall, that's not how we define the stories. Now, when you want to worship him, if you need to worship him, there's a very direct cultural evidence that is compared him differently from all the other major deities. His offerings, if you wanted to bring something to him to keep him happy, were all about pastoral life. So, anything that like staffs and furs, hunting weapons, gathering packs, things like that, all things with pastoral life, were going to be offerings to him. This is a recognition of the regions influenced by their populace, and he's later included in the broader Mesopotamian temple systems. So once you're part of the temple systems, you are 100% legit. So again, this is an outside god, and every now and then we hear of outsider gods, especially in Mesopotamia, because you saw the rise and fall of a lot of different people in Mesopotamia. One of the most hotly contested areas, because you had the Akkadians, you had the Babylonians, you had the Amorites. You had all these different groups, some of them that merged together. That's why we see more overlap of their deities than almost anywhere else in the world. Now, unlike urban gods, he didn't have a temple, a centralized temple for himself. He was part of the temple system, meaning he could be worshipped at these temples, but there are no large temple complexes that are built towards him like we would see with Zeus or we would see with Hathor in other periods. He had no large priesthood involved. Again, this was more about pastoral events, so he was not in the priesthood or seen through the priesthood as these people were ultimately seen. Now, theologically, he is a civilization's aware of the outside world, is what they're seeing. It is the inevitability of cultural influence and change. That if you have a culture, And it's large enough, like the city of New York. Eventually, you're going to attract so many different cultures that it changes your culture as well. That's what happens. Essentially, he represents that before it ever happens. So, or for the first time, right? Then we would see it happen. It was the same thing with like the Vandals. When the Vandals came into the Roman Empire, right? They were the outsider. They came in and they eventually changed enough that it wasn't recognizable as what it is. There are some key mythologies because even though he personally is not he's not a story-rich deed. There's not a lot of stories about this guy. These were nomads. They were probably more oral tradition, so they weren't writing the stuff down. And what he represents is this marriage to Martu, who is obviously the structure. So what we're seeing is in this mythology, Amurru and Martu get married. She representing the urban values, he representing the nomadic and trying to get these things to coexist with one another. So it's a very interesting battle. And it's the reluctance of settled society to accept him because he was an outsider. So there is that. But this mythology that's written, again, this is myth. This is not real. It's only mythology. Eventually integrates these two halves into one. At least culturally, that's what they're going for. And it looks like, to some degree, that they did that. So he is not a dominant myth cycle figure, but he is reflected socially. He has another consort in literary traditions, but doing effectively the same thing. He is the distinction between nomadic, nomadic versus urban. That's the two instances. People who were city dwellers and settled, or people who stayed more mobile. And this is where he is. He was viewed by outsiders with suspicion, but they could never get past their influence. So they were the outsiders who became so integral into the system that they couldn't be ignored, and that's how they gained political power in a system that moved away from warfare as much into more political system. This is what they were going for. Now, in mythology, he fits under outsiders force. So I would say like Ptah, he's in that vein. He's like the King Zeus type. He is the destroyer because they destabilize to facilitate change. So we're going to compare him to the other two, Enkidu and Odin, right? And we'll kind of see how they're integrated. And this one's different than everyone else because he was the outsider. Well, he's similar to Enkidu in the sense they are both outsiders, but we'll explain how the difference is. Now, the next one that we see, and this guy, the reason I like this guy here is because it's an easy tie-in to Odin, right? The wandering aspect of Odin is very much tied to nomads, and this is Odin does it. It's more of a forced exile. Now, Odin, of course, is one of my favorite deities of all time because this guy is all about knowledge, and this is what this is about. So Odin self-exiles in his role as the wanderer. He wanders seeking knowledge. He is the master of self-sacrifice to acquire more knowledge, which is the power for him. He is the patron of rulers, warriors, and poets, but his power itself, he's not like Zeus, where his power is just inherited. It is earned through these extreme acts. That's where Odin really becomes different. There's a reason that he loses his eye. He gives up his eye. He is the core mechanisms of sacrifice, gives you knowledge, and that gives you authority. So he governs war strategy, not the brutal forces of war. He is a tactician of war. He's always planning for war. And he spends all his time planning for Ragnarok, even though there's no way that they're ever able to defend Ragnarok. So we do see that. He is about fate being awareness. Like, because he gets this knowledge, it becomes almost torture for him because he realizes not only is Ragnarok going to happen, that there's nothing that he or anyone else can do about this coming disaster. He also learns magical systems. Most of the time when we hear about magic, very rarely is it associated with the male deities. But in this case, Odin, hello there, styles by Ashby. Hammond, Ham, Kana, Amurru. You absolutely are on point with that. So this is where Odin is. He comes obviously from Norse culture. We know this about him. This is Germanic. This is Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and later Iceland, where was the region that he was predominantly known in, right? Now, his worship obviously goes way back, a thousand years before this era, common era. So we're probably at like 1,500 years approximately of Odin worship, or talking about. He's one of the earlier forms as Wotan appears across Germanic tribes. So in their culture, he was very talked about. He was always looked after. And this is a deity because he would take on these guys as he wanted to wander around. Oh, that's a good analogy. Wow, Job, Dan, Odin. I've kind of seen this, and I think there's a measure of stickiness to it that deserves investigation. So I will look at those triads because I see exactly where you're going with that. Now, after Christianity, Odin somehow still survives despite everything, becomes Christian in nature. He survives through the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda. These are the mythologies that were formed by Snorri Sturluson, who went around the countryside and gathered all these stories. This is that in itself is an amazing story that he was able to keep all those myths together to keep his culture and his civilization united. This was an amazing feat that endures to this day. It's because of him that all of us get to read about Odin and Baldur and Freya, because they were able to preserve their myths so well. And culturally, they really defend that. They really make sure that they give out really good representations. I don't know how they're allowing this new Marvel Thor character to keep running around, but they do. And yes, these were all god kings as their unifier. Now, with Odin, there was a lot of stuff that was going on. Human sacrifice, ritual hangings, offerings to get this knowledge that he got. Kings playing gods by practicing paganism. Very possible. Very possible. I mean, the Amorites, if we're talking about Amurru, he was a person, right? He was himself an invader. He was not a god. He was ultimately elevated to being seen as a god. So I think there's a lot to what you're saying there. And there's been some inklings that was Odin as well, because he was not seen as a divine creature. He becomes divine because of all the knowledge that he's gained. So, again, anyone wants to say that they were not gods, I can't really argue with you, because the way they're written about, this was not. Odin was tied to human sacrifice, which is what he was doing. He hung himself, he died, and he got that knowledge. So, again, I talked about this when I talked about Enoch was the same thing. A regular guy who got so much knowledge that you were accepted as divine. Now, in this case, with Odin, whereas with Amurru, we were talking more about the acceptance of culture, the outsider culture, the nomadic culture versus the urban culture. Odin is saying that knowledge is the highest form of power, right? Danites in the Bible chose after the Amorites. Danites, the Amorites, I think we're all... So, again, when we talked about that area of the world, which Styles is bringing up here, there's so much like this group and this group. This was, I think, one of the most hotly contested areas of the world that we would see empires rise and fall to that. Like, there must have been something in the soil, right? This is Fertile Crescent, right? So it must have been hella fertile to spawn all those civilizations. But in this case, with Odin, power is not given. Power is taken after suffering insight. And the significant thing about Odin is when he loses his eye, he loses that eye for knowledge. And the key part is what it's saying is that he would never see the world the same way again. That's why his eye was gone. It became symbolic. You're never going to see the world the same after you get this knowledge. And it was 100% true, right? Change what he did. So this change, he understood that this is controlled chaos. It was not your job to control or stop it. He learned how to be strategic, manipulative. He's far more of a strategist than people give him credit. And in mythology, if you really look at it, he was the master of spreading that. And he accepted the inevitable, which is Ragnarok, which is a huge thing because it means that you're going to have an end, and he had to deal with it. There was no fighting off Ragnarok, despite the fact that I know before that he was running around saying, hey, let's get this place called Valhalla. Here's what we're going to do. Everyone who dies in battle, you're going to come to Valhalla because we're going to use you to fight off Ragnarok. Well, he was just doing that for fun because there was no fighting off of Ragnarok. You were never going to avert Ragnarok. It was an inevitability. So what this changes him is to a planner of the cosmic conflict where he tries to preserve as much knowledge. Remember, this cycle, tick, 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 ding, you're over, Odin. You and Freya, all them. But existence itself is not over. This is cyclical. So despite the fact that this world dies and gets consumed and he gets eaten and Thor gets killed, new gods emerge later. I think of Brangi. I think one of Thor's sons becomes prominent. I think he becomes so. It's just a power cycle thing. The old power set is gone. It's replaced by a new cycle, and that's how Odin ultimately got to see it. But culturally, he was someone who valued, a culture that valued warfare and conquest to a degree, but they had respect for cunning over brute strength. That's something that always kind of reminded me of, like Odysseus, when we hear about the Odyssey, right? Cunning. They accepted death as inevitable and also as deeply meaningful, and they idealized the ruler archetype. He was the model for thinking, the first thinking man's king, and that is what represented his real power. That's where he got his real power from. He is elite power and elite structure at the same time. He is a self-exiled seeker. He's not passive. He's not exploitative. He is a wanderer in disguise. He is the knowledge hunter of all time. He is self-transforming entity when needed to adapt new cultures. He moved between the civilization and the wilderness all the time. So he was comfortable in the outsider role. You see him like one of the favorite. Now this is an interesting one. I like this one too. Let me see if I can find this here, because some modern storytelling kind of leverages that. I'm going to find this character. If you're familiar with the Dragonlance series, Margaret Weiss, Tracy Hickman, they leverage now they come in. They're leveraging some Mesopotamian culture, right off the bat. So they talk about Tiamat, and that's kind of where they build their structure at. But if you pay attention, they've got another character in here. I'm going to bring this up for you guys that I think is Odin still. I don't even think it's hard to see. I saw this character when I was first getting exposed to Odin, and this made me think about it right off the bat. Is this character that's going to show up here? Man, I hate when they get all these different kind of images. Let me grab this the old school way. Let me see if I can grab some. Come on. You got these new images, and they don't want you to be able to copy them and use them, but let's see if I can do it this way. Because this is a cool character. I think you guys need to look at this. Okay. This is the character here. In Dragonlance, this is Fizban, and he's supposed to be... Now, they represent gods, so they do have gods. Like Tiamat is a god. She takes kind of a almost kind of human personified form, and she moves around. So the goddess Tiamat, and I think she has like a physical form, Takesis, I think, something like that. But this is Odin. So they give him the role as the wanderer who accumulates all this magic, but he has god abilities. He knows stuff. He always acts like, oh, he's kind of forgetting. They make him kind of bumbling. But I always felt like this was the representation of Odin in that role of the gatherer of knowledge. He seems like he doesn't ever know what's going on, but he's the most powerful wizard of all time while he's there. So this was a role that I saw coming up in there, and I always felt like this was really good, ideal representation of Odin in that particular role of the outsider there. So the last one I'm going to talk about, and again, this is a triad, so we always do 3. The last one I want to get out of this one, man, was this is my main man right here, man. This is my dude right here, man. If I can get okay, this is the dude, Enkidu. And Enkidu is one of the most solid dudes ever. If you guys have heard the story of Gilgamesh, this is his road dog. This is his Mac 10. This is a dude that he called when things got hot was Enkidu. And you can see my man up here is pretty dirty. This is the wild man. Now, Enkidu, interpreted means the Lord of good place, right? Or the Lord of the steep. Again, the steep, the outdoor manifestation of like the mound, the steep. His symbols was the animal, the natural landscape. I am love. Shout out to you there. He is muscular. He is not a man. He's not a god. He's not a man. He is a divinely created being formed by the goddess Amurru to oppose Gilgamesh. Remember, Gilgamesh was out there tripping, raping people, being a jackass to his own citizens. They prayed to the god that not to even get rid of him. They prayed that someone would teach him humility so he would stop tripping. That's how much the people still love Gilgamesh, despite how bad and arrogant all the stuff he was. They didn't want him dead. They wanted him to do the right thing. They wanted him to be right. So the gods created, remember, he himself is like 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. So they create Enkidu to be the perfect match for him. So I don't know, he's a divinely created creature who is as strong as this divine king of Uruk. And he really balances him out. He is the embodiment of pre-civilization humanity. Because Uruk, again, Uruk and what Gilgamesh has, this is the first like city, right? Like in mythology, this is supposed to be like one of the first cities. So him coming around, this is obviously very different. He represents everything that Gilgamesh is not. He has all the strength, but he's still in touch with nature, and that's what he represents. So he balances out Gilgamesh with kingship and excess, and he becomes this bridge connecting him to his animal instinct and human society. That's who he is. He lives among the animals. He rejects the human systems. He exists in harmony with all the animals. Just at this point, animals don't roll up to us unless they're going to try to eat you. They would roll up to him and be like, hey, whoever, the wolves, you can see who rolls, but they just roll up because he was a part of them. Obviously, he's strong. So what happens, and they do my boy wrong, man. This is a terrible story. Let me see if I can find this person here, because I'm going to have to do a triad talking about this person here, who is just insidious, man. And I think it's Shamhat. Is it Shamhat? Let me see if I can find Shamhat. Because this is problematic. And this is a good representation. Yeah, this is a good representation of her right here. Because my man was pure, man. Right? My man was pure. He wasn't caught up in any of the trappings of regular society. He was pure about it. And you know what? You know what brought him down? You know who brought him down? Shamhat. Right? You see Shamhat. You see what she did. She put that magic on him, man. She put a spell on you because you're mine. And after that, he was changed. After spending, he spent like 2 weeks, man. They were at it, man. They were getting that action in. So after that, he becomes civilized. He's a man now. He doesn't have the smell of an animal anymore. So the animals stay away from him. He gains intelligence and speech because he didn't even have that before. That's how good she was. But now the animals don't mess with him anymore. You come around, he's like, oh, come here, but they're like, rrr, and they bite back because trust zero. Hey, look, you see it happening right here. This isn't my story. This is a mythological story. It says don't trust them, right? They did the same thing to my boy Samson. I'll tell you guys about that one later. So this is where he is. He loses his connection to the animal world, the thing that kept him so pure and from being corrupted. But he's a big part of Enkidu stories. Now, this is early Sumerian poetry, so we're talking 2100 BCE. So now we're talking like 4,000, 4,500 years that he's been on the scene. He became standardized in the Akkadian version, which is about 1200 BC. Geographically, this is still Uruk. This is all the area that was ruled by Gilgamesh. The Amorites would have been outside this area, would come later on. He has there is no way to worship him. He had no cult, nothing like that. So he was not worshipped. He is just a narrative figure that I just give mad props to, dude. Every story, every month, Lust, they take the fools out, man. Lust, yeah, they're going to get you. KRS-One, man. You hear that song? Love's going to get you. Love's going to get you. Love's going to get you. See? That's what it does to you. They cut your hair off, man. You cut your hair off and then you lose yourself. So Enkidu attracts me because he's with Gilgamesh. When Gilgamesh fights the Bull of Heaven, that was an important fight because they're both heroes. This is a great story. He's also with Enkidu when he kills the protector of the seed, Umbaba. He protects Umbaba. Love, it's evolution. Yeah, man. I see what pill you took, homie. I can tell where you're going. I can tell where you're going with this one, man. And I can't say you're wrong, man. I can't. Love's gonna get you, right? So after all this, man, he's got this duality of human existence. He knows nature. He loves nature. Nature's like, yeah, get up out of here, man. You smell like them. You are no longer part of it. So he was created as this challenge to Enkidu. And so I guess he lost. Ultimately, he wins that stalemate, but he gives up the part of him that made him special, which is the part of the wild man. So he becomes what he, or at least in tune with what he was supposed to resist. Now, I don't know if this is why he dies later in the story, because when they kill Umbaba, which is a terrible tragedy, this is again, the Gilgamesh part takes over and says, hey, Let's be a jerk and let's go kill the protector of the cedar forest because we'll be famous for it. And that's essentially what they went out and did. They killed this, Umbaba, who is a protector of the cedar forest, just for sport. And he gets poisoned. Enkidu gets poisoned. Has a very painful, like wasting death, and this breaks Gilgamesh down because it is the epic of Gilgamesh. So we know who the story's about. Yeah, you got to die to teach him a lesson, and that's what happened. He dies, and because he's so heartbroken by the death of his closest friend, this is his boy. This is like, that's my boy right there. And he then would go on to try to seek immortality. He wants to avoid death. That would fracture the Gilgamesh story, and he would take on, that would be the dominant part of his mythology. And Enkidu would never be around. Although I've always called him the ultimate best friend. This is Pippin. This is Scottie Pippen mythologically, right? Allows you to win and take it to the next level, and never gets the same credit that you do, right? He doesn't get the shine that Gilgamesh does, and neither does Scottie Pippen. So in each of these, we have these outsiders. We have Amurru, who was an external force, who represents systematic change, right? They change the politics of Mesopotamia during that period of time. Odin is the outsider through his self-imposed exile to go out, to pick up knowledge, to hear whispers. He was always listening. He was always listening because he wanted to know, somebody, are they talking about Ragnarok? Shh, shh, shh. Hold on, did he say something about Ragnarok? That's who you ever be sitting someplace in a bar and you look over and some person's like all up in your they're all in your conversation. That was Odin with a hat. You're like, hey, what's going on? And he just pretend like he's just old man. Oh, downstairs, I'm just having some ale. That's what he would do. But he's taking notes down. He's like, yeah, okay. And they represent that. Just a great figure. Enkidu was assimilation, an outsider forced to assimilate. And you see, all he got, at least he got whatever he got with Shamhat. I guess it was all worth it because you die soon later and your memory is marred a bit by what Enkidu had you doing. So those are three versions of the outsider, all of them kind of reflecting things. As culture was changing, we were going from more nomadic, and that fight between the nomadic people and the city folk, right? The city folk are like, let's put a wall around. You guys can't just roll through here. Well, we're just following, the gazelle. I don't care. That's why I put a fence around this bitch. So you can walk all around. But they got to, as they moved, they became more and more influential and became part of the very system, the Amorites, who we'd hear about later. And then, of course, the other two playing their various roles, Odin being an outsider, wanderer, and Enkidu losing himself, coming into civilization. So this is what I wanted. I want to get it done because my boy requested it. And thank you again. I want to say, if you made it all the way through this long one, thank you again, because I got to say the name Amurru, which is similar to my boy. I feel like he's speaking to me right now. It's only been I think he's been gone for like a month. So he's still kind of fresh for me. And I'm just glad, man. I feel a little bit more at peace just because I got to talk about him, man. Maybe it was the homie reaching out to me. I don't know. But it felt good, just to remember your boy as he was in life. So I'm gonna log off now. Yep, this is right about. I always log. You know what? I don't know if I start, speeding up the material because I get hungry, or if I just finish because I'm hungry. I don't know how that times out, but I'm always ravenous when we get to this point. And here we are again, and I am ravenous once again. So I'm going to dip off, get some more work done for you guys. I'll be back later with another MythLab. Thank you for stopping in. Hit that like and subscribe, and make